I didn't like the community.
That's all the other years.
Thanks for coming.
That was the other one. When Christina left, I was like,
Christina, I love Christina.
We're talking about suits.
She was my favorite show.
Oh, my parents are
Like, I had a ritual on Sundays. My husband couldn't talk to me. I was on the couch with my glass of wine, and I would buy. I actually probably am saving money now because I would buy a good bottle of wine, and I also wouldn't share half the time.
Not Eric, no.
But that's saving money. But that's I am. I am. They have a spin-off, and the spin-off is excellent. It's just it's called A Good Fight, and it's. Yeah, so it's what's her name? The gal from the Bridge, the one that was the star, one that was in love with Jim Carrey. Oh, I don't know her name. I don't remember her name. Well, she's got a really unique career.
What's her name?
We were gonna get around.
Julie Roberts.
Eric Roberts, that's her brother.
It's great.
Okay. Hi everyone, welcome to folks remotely too. My name is Lady Edos. I'm the program manager for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office. And we have Annika Lorenz, who is in our DI group office for now. She will be moving over to the HR system side of the house, but she is here helping out. Welcome. This is National Disability Employment Awareness Month, as some of you know. Every October, we try to partner with the All Access Employee Resource Group, or the ERG, which is Disability Inclusion ERG, to work on different events, activities to promote Disability Employment Awareness Month. And this is one of our brown bag months that we're having this year. So our topic today is autism inclusion in the workplace. Jack Hogan is here. I'll be introducing him in a minute. But we'll be talking about the benefits of enhancing an organization's neurodiversity, general tips for hiring managers, interviewing applicants, or working with colleagues on the spectrum, and also some success stories. Jack's worked with various companies in Silicon Valley, here in the Bay Area, who are looking to promote autism programs to get folks hired and trained. Mike, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you. So he will be talking a little bit about that under the Autism Advantage program. So we'll be sharing a little bit more about that. And the goal of Autism Advantage is to further the ability of people on the spectrum to find gainful and integrated employment. The program achieves this goal through a two-pronged approach, helping people harness their unique talents and realize their potential, and two, creating high-performing organizations through the inclusion of creating a more inclusive workforce. So as far as Jack Hogan, he is a technology startup veteran and co-founder of the Autism Advantage program, which trains applicants on the autism spectrum and matches them with leading companies. Participating companies with successful matches include Autodesk, Cisco, SAP, Visa, Ernst & Young, and Microsoft. Autism Advantage program was developed out of Expandability, a nonprofit organization, highly successful Autism at Work program, which was first pioneered by software company SAP. Hogan studied accounting at Menlo College in Atherton and is an avid Bay Area sports fan. So without further ado, please welcome Jack.
Thank you. I think that was a nice introduction. And so cool. So yeah, my name is Jack. I'm here. I want to talk to you guys a little bit about our Autism Advantage program. But before I start, I usually do this training for recruiting teams. I actually have done it with Lady and your recruiting team here a month or two ago. So let me just get a feel for the room. How many of you guys are like on the engineering side? Okay, and then the HR side, and then business side. Okay, good. So we have a really good mix here.
Science side.
Science. Oh, apologies. Science, engineering, and STEM, right? So basically what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about the people that I've worked with. Then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the statistics on autism. I'm sure many of you already know, I'm guessing a lot of you here are parents or relatives of someone who's affected. And so there may be a little review, but for those of you who don't know, it'll be a good learning experience. Then we'll talk a little bit about who's addressing the problem. So maybe that will help some of the companies that we work with, and many more companies on the list trying to get something started. And then we'll go through a few tips and tricks on interviewing. How many of you guys here in this room are hiring managers? Yeah. How many conduct interviews regularly? Okay, so about half of you guys. So there'll be some tips and tricks that we work in there to make it, to give you guys a little bit more perspective when you're interviewing. And then we'll talk about some more success stories. And then hopefully at the end, we'll have a rousing session of question and answer, because that's what's most fun for me. So first thing I want to do is start off with talking about some of our students. So this is Carrie Tierney. She's mother of two, and also on the autism spectrum. She came to us in our first go-round as we redeveloped our Autism Advantage program. And we had just changed the curriculum to focus on data analytics. So a little bit about Carrie is she used to talk like this. Just, that was her go-to. She put her hand right here and just talked directly into her hand. And for about the first 3 weeks, we thought, how are we ever going to get her away from this approach? So the way our program works is we bring in students and we have them work together on data analytics projects. And by the end of this program, Carrie had come a long way. So one of our main goals with the program is to actually find people that are gainful employment. So since Carrie was a working mother, or a mother seeking work, we actually found her a job where she was able to work from home. So she launched with one of our friendly companies called chargeback.com. They, you know, whenever you use your credit card, right? You get a statement. If someone uses it fraudulently, you call your company and say charge back. So these guys are a startup out in Utah that has a really widely distributed workforce. And Carrie was able to fit right in there. So we got her a job there as a chargeback analyst, which was perfect because she could take care of her kids from home and make a good salary. Within 2.5 months, they saw that Carrie was dramatically better than most of their other work from home analysts, and they promoted her to a position where she was doing basically sales, solution support, and targeting. So she was using the data analytics knowledge that she learned, well, that she had already, but she worked on in our program, and applied it to actually generating revenue for this company. All right, so this guy is Ryan Flaherty, a good friend of mine. He happens to be out here in Berkeley. So I'm going to tell you a little story about Ryan. I got Ryan's resume, and I thought, oh, this guy should be able to get a job. He has a master's degree in mathematics from Berkeley, right? With that on your resume, you should get every callback every time. The problem with Ryan is the phone calls with him are very difficult. So basically, it starts out, I grab Ryan's resume, I think Ryan would be perfect for our program, I give him a call. Hey Ryan, how's it going? Is this thing on? Hello? Are you there? Still no response. About 45 seconds later, I get the reply of, hey, it's going good. That's it. So myself and my colleague have him on the phone for about 15 minutes, and it's painful. You cannot, the exchange of information is not happening in an efficient manner. So you can imagine all of you who are on the hiring side, if you get on a phone screen with someone, and it takes them 45 seconds to reply to your question without saying, or cueing you at all, it's going to be a very short phone call, isn't it? So what did we do? We thought, we got to see if this guy's smart. That phone call doesn't match up with the master's degree from Berkeley in mathematics. So we get in our car and we drive out here to meet Ryan. And this was probably what got me to jump both feet in and start this program, was this specific meeting with Ryan. Because on that phone call, you would have thought that Ryan could never have a job because it's just too hard to exchange information. So we go to a pizza place over there in Berkeley because he's living out here, and we sit down with him, and for about the first 30 minutes, it felt like he was interviewing us, not the other way around. So you could tell with a lot of people on the spectrum that people have tried to help them before. And sadly, a lot of them have failed. So he was kind of dejected, seemed very depressed. So for the first 30 minutes, it was just like the phone call, very hard to exchange information. After about 30 minutes, he sort of got the sense that we were not going to leave, and that he was going to have to finish the pizza with us. And he sort of put on his boots and decided that he was going to engage. And from there on, it took off like wildfire. He started talking about movies. He started talking about all the fun things he did in his career and what he did in his spare time. So his career, let me back up. He's 37 years old. He's never had a real job. The extent of his job was tutoring kids in math. And basically, with someone of his brilliance, that's much to blow up upon. So we're sitting at this pizza restaurant. I asked Brian, what'd you do your senior thesis on? He goes, I didn't do a thesis, I did a project. Okay, what did you do your project on? Oh, well, I created a series of matrices that when they're summed or subtracted, it always equals a real number. So my colleague, Renee, is an engineering master's from Stanford. And we're both sitting there thinking, why does that matter? Who cares? And he turns and without missing a beat, points at me and goes, can you imagine how much easier it would have been to teach Jack math if you had those matrices? So he's already joking with us. So that was when we knew there was a spark there. And we basically, from that point on, decided that we needed to make Ryan our first project. We need to get Ryan a job. So Ryan, we brought him in to one of our partners' offices. Visa actually has hired Ryan, and they've had a lot of success with him thus far. But the biggest challenge was trying to get him over the hump, right? How are we going to introduce Ryan to a hiring manager? He cannot talk on the phone. It just is not going to happen. So what we did was Visa has these telepresence machines at their office in Foster City, where you sit behind it and it looks like you're in the same room as a person. I'm sure you guys have some awesome telepresence in the lab. So what Visa did was they made Ryan an accommodation. They said, all right, we know phone calls are tough. We're going to have Ryan come in to our Foster City office and sit in this telepresence room because he's actually interviewing for a job in Denver as a business analyst. So Ryan goes in, nails the interview. We talked to him after. Said, Ryan, how do you think it go? How'd you like the telepresence? He says, it's no different than Skype for me. But we know on the other end that it made all the difference for the hiring manager, because if you're not looking at the person, you can't see that they're thinking or taking notes or getting those cues. So Ryan is now working at Visa in Denver. He's making a very nice salary, and he's bought his first car last week. He's completely independent now, moved out of his parents' house. He's the reason why I do this. So, who's familiar with the autism? Yes. 1 in 68 is the occurrence of autism now in the United States. I would argue that this has always been the occurrence, and that there was some diagnostics categorization that made it very difficult for people on the spectrum to get diagnosed all the way up until about 2005, 2006. In some cases, it even cost parents $5,000 to $10,000 to get their child diagnosed on the spectrum. So you can imagine if you're from a lower income community, the chances of you getting your child diagnosed, which is the only way you can get insurance support, and then getting them the support they need is very low. So about 90% of people on the autism spectrum are under or unemployed, and 51% of those who are employed, so 51% of that minuscule 10% believe that their skills are not being utilized. So this is the problem. Yeah.
What's the distance?
Yes. So who's taking a crack at this problem? So the company that we founded is stemming from a group that actually started this initiative at SAP about 4 years ago. 4 years ago, someone on the SAP board or someone in the C-suite has a child or a grandchild on the spectrum, right? This is how things started. From there, they start socializing the idea that we need to get some people hired that fit this category. These people are smart. They just need different ways to contribute. So SAP takes the ball and runs with this. And they form a goal of having 1% of their workforce be on the spectrum by the year 2020. How are they doing on that? They would need to have about 780 employees on the autism spectrum to get 1% of their workforce on the spectrum. And right now they're at 250, 280. So they're doing better than anyone else. I don't think they're going to hit the goal by 2020, but if you gave them until 2023, I think that they're on pace to do it in that. JP Morgan Chase, one of our other partners. So they specifically hire people into the QA organization. One thing you're going to hear if you go and research on hiring on the autism spectrum is that people always try to pigeonhole autistic people in QA. I really don't believe in this. I'm actually very much against it. But it seems to be an easy inroad to companies. Chase has hired 68 people into their QA organization, and they were the fastest to scale the program. They just started hiring, and then they never let up. Microsoft, they're big in this space. They followed the lead of SAP. Microsoft, we work with them. It's different to work with them. They have a very difficult hiring bar, so they would prefer to hire autistic people that went to Berkeley or Stanford. But they're actually making a lot of strides in the space. They've opened up all of their contracting roles to people on the spectrum. So imagine, everyone knows that it's a spectrum, right? So people either need more support or less support. If you take one thing away from this today, is do not say higher functioning or lower functioning. It just irritates the hell out of me and irritates all parents of any kid on the spectrum. Does your child need more support? Do they need less support? That is the nicest and simplest way to say that disparity. So Microsoft's actually opened up a ton of jobs that fit the middle range on that spectrum. And I believe they're going to start hiring people to work in their Microsoft stores in the next year, which is going to be huge. And the cool thing about that is they've made all of those contracts lifetime contracts. So usually as a contractor, you have to phase out after 1 or 2 years. I think the labs has some specific rolling hiring as well, where you guys have to have appointments for a certain amount of time. So Microsoft did away with that to allow people with disabilities to retain those jobs. So here's some of our partners from EY. They're mock interviewing Liam right there. They actually flew in from New York to be involved with the program. So a little bit about EY. They are probably my closest partner because I have a really good relationship with them. So let me tell you how they started their program. They started with 4 people. They decided that they were going to do this initiative and they hired 4 people in Philadelphia. Do they have a job for them? No, they hadn't figured it out yet. They just said, we want to do this, let's hire some people. So they sent out a company-wide email. Sent it out to about, no, not company-wide, office-wide. Sent it out to about 1,300 people. And they said, hey, we need volunteers to mentor these students, or these new employees. How many responses do you guys think they got? Half those. That was incredible. 200 people replied to that. They said they would be willing and able to mentor. So we actually see that happen all the time. So EY brings in these 4 people, and within the first 2 weeks, they've rewritten the EY onboarding training manual and reduced it from a 14-hour onboarding to a 3.5-hour onboarding. This is for all new hires. And that was within the first 2 weeks. They said, why do we have all this redundant information here? If you just give someone an example of this form, break it up, draw some lines on it, and show them how to fill out the form, that'd be a lot easier than reading this sheet of papers this big, which was their normal onboarding. So EY has this success. They think, how do we play this further? And how do we make a business case for this? To take it, well, what? EY, Big Four, they should be pushing this initiative worldwide. So what they did was they found an inefficiency in their current business model. EY does consulting. These consultants are same as your McKinsey, same as your BCG, right? They're getting sent out into the field to work with their partners, and they're being billed out to these companies at $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 an hour for one person's time, right? That's your standard consultant. So what EY said is, how can we make this process more efficient, cheaper for our customers, and better for our bottom line, and create jobs for people on the spectrum? So that is where EY came up with the idea to create a center of excellence. That's just what they decided to call this. It's an all autistic group within their office in Dallas. They hired 3 of our students right from here and moved them to Dallas to join this group. So what this group does is, if you're that consultant who's getting billed out for all this amount of money, and your client hands you 1 billion lines of data in an Excel document or in 10 Excel documents, instead of you charging the client for personally crunching those numbers, your team, your backup, is the center of excellence. And basically, they're able to cut down that data in half the time, come up with the insights, and then the consultant is able to show that directly to the clients. So it's better for the client, better for the consultant because you can have more clients, better for EY because the consultant can have more clients, and the people on the spectrum make an above average living wage. 80K in Dallas is like 140K in Bay Area. So these are the wins, and there are people finding. So hopefully, you guys can take that away today and maybe look for some inefficiencies here. Maybe there are none, but I don't know. I wouldn't be standing here if not. All right. So autism spectrum disorder. Who's familiar with some of the key traits that autistic people present? All right. Let me hear some.
Social skills
Yes,
or problems.
that's the biggest number one.
Loud noises.
Yes.
Environmental stimulus.
Bingo. Great. Anyone else?
Sometimes they need to feel like
Yes. Bingo. Especially under stress.
Really keep interested in very niche topics.
Yes. Bingo. Anyone else?
Repetition of, sorry, go ahead.
Strong focus.
Strong focus. Yes.
I was going to say repetition of interesting topics.
Yeah. Correct. So as you guys know, autism spectrum disorder, we've named a bunch of the traits there. Let me talk a little bit about why it's called autism spectrum disorder now instead of Asperger's and pervasive developmental disability not otherwise specified and autism. So originally there was like 6 categories for how people were getting diagnosed with this. And the problem was the biggest one of these categories was pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified, which means you hit 6 out of the 8 criteria to be put on the autism spectrum, but because you've been lumped into this category, you get no services and basically you're not autistic. So about 10 years ago, the government decided to change this standard. So now it is a spectrum. Anyone who is on the spectrum is now able to get services and is covered by the insurance companies. So this is huge. This is why everyone says, oh, there's an autism epidemic. There's not. There have always been this many autistic people. We're just finally able to do a really good job diagnosing some of them. I wouldn't say we're doing a great job, but we're much better than lumping them into buckets where some get services and some don't. So as we talked about, some of those things that you guys mentioned, some are negatives and some are positives. So being able to do repetitive tasks without getting bored or irritated by it, that's why people always try to have people on the autism spectrum do QA. Some of them can do this, others can't. So people on the autism spectrum are just like you and me. So I'm an avid Bay Area sports fan, right? I will go and watch any sporting event. I will be there personally in the crowd. I'm sure some of you guys, that sounds like the worst possible way to spend a Friday night. And there's nothing wrong with that. So one of the things that I also want you guys to take away from this is that people on the spectrum, just like you and I, they have a variety of interests. They're not all technical, and they're not all interested in doing repetitive things. Autism is it's called like has many co-disorders with it. So about 65 to 85% of people on the autism spectrum have some other mental issue. So like depression, ADD, ADHD, bipolar disorder, epilepsy. Those are all very commonly found within the autistic community. So step back about myself. One of the reasons why I'm also really engaged in this is I have really bad ADD and ADHD. So I was always being sent to the doctor's office, take this medicine, take that medicine, do this, do that, do this, and you'll excel in school or you'll excel at life. And personally, I thought I was so fine. Fast forward 10 years, I am fine. Everyone's fine. And people on the spectrum have also gone through a lot of that in their life. Almost all of them who have made it to this stage where they're ready to find employment. A lot of the therapies that were done for them probably helped. A lot of the therapies that were done for them might have hindered. All right, so brilliant but underemployed. 50% of people on the autism spectrum have average or above average intellect. Just because they might not be as good at verbalizing it does not mean that they are below average on the intellect. Some of the smartest people on the autism spectrum are nonverbal. And once you can Google stories, nonverbal person given an iPad, then you'll see the intelligence there. So one of the things I want to touch on here is that all of the job tracks that we've created are based on neurotypical people getting into those job tracks, right? How does the interview process start? It starts off by navigating an online form. There's no real examples. Or a person calls you out of the blue as a recruiter. Then what's step one? Phone screen. So most of the people on the autism spectrum get pushed out of the process on that phone screen. So that's one of the things that we're trying to change. We did an awesome training with the recruiting team. Now they know what to look for. If you see a person with a PhD in computer science and you call them up on the phone and they can't communicate very well that way, then chances are there might be something else there, and you should probably try to find a way to bridge that gap. So this is an exercise. I want you guys to all talk amongst your neighbors. What do you think when a candidate doesn't make eye contact with you during an interview? Don't all jump up at once. Oh, wow. I agree. That's good.
They're really nervous.
Yeah.
Unprofessional.
Unprofessional, yeah.
Shy.
Shy. Yep.
Insecure.
Insecure. Yep. Cultural. Yeah. That's really cultural. Strong. So what about when a candidate answers a question with very few words?
Smart.
They're saving you time. Get this interview wrapped up in about 20 minutes. Let's knock this out of the park. So this is really a common thing. If you ask them a cut and dry question, they're going to answer with a cut and dry answer. What about when a candidate interrupts me or speaks too loudly or has a weird sounding voice? How do you guys react to that?
Too eager.
Yeah.
Or you might think they're really.
Yeah, that's a common that happens. So what about a candidate fidgeting during an interview? You've probably seen me if you're tapping on this right now. Nerves? I took care of that.
That they're hyperactive.
Exactly. So now the question that we have to really sort of shift our minds to figuring out is like, what is required to actually do the job? Do any of those questions that we just discussed impact that? So think about that. We'll touch back on that in a slide. So some of the characteristics that you'll see in a person who's on the autism spectrum are listed right here. The rocking back and forth is a pretty common thing that you'll see, especially in an interview situation, because the anxiety level is incredibly high. When I interview, I think I do a pretty good job of interviewing. But if you're someone on the spectrum, odds are you do not do that good of a job interviewing. You've been turned down a lot, and these situations are few and far between for you getting these interviews, even getting on site. So the anxiety level is too low. So typical challenges. We touched on about most of these when I asked earlier. Sometimes lighting, crowded spaces, transitions. This is a big thing that I always ask interviewers to focus on whenever I do the interview training. So basically you guys are asking questions, right? And your goal is to check off boxes on your side of the house. Do they know this? Do they know that? Do they know this? And oftentimes you'll ask a question like, to listen to story, and that's what we're trying to check off. You guys need to figure out ways to deftly transition or allow the person to know that you're going to transition. First 10 minutes of an interview is small talk anyway, right? You could say something like, all right, now the small talk's out of the way, let's talk about your skills. So auditory processing, this is big. People on the spectrum often have an auditory processing delays. Ryan, remember 45 seconds of dead air on the phone? That's not really Ryan's fault. He has an auditory processing delay. He hears it, then he processes it. But it takes him about 30 seconds to process it. Then he's finally registered what he heard, and now he's thinking of a response. So this is just a really awkward time for an interview, but it's just time to exercise a little patience, because the answer that will come out usually comes out of it will come out as a strong answer. All right, yes?
So when doing, I'm sorry, can we interrupt the question?
Yes, please.
So one of the questions on that would be, go back to the previous slide, is we had our questions for our interviewers, our interviewees written down. We could read the questions from the benefit of presenting them the written question.
Yeah, that's actually one of my top recommendations, but we can touch on it now.
I just want to make sure that in terms of for these types of interviews, that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So the structured interview process is going to remove bias across the board. I don't know if I mentioned this before. The first company that I started, we built a software product that did race and gender blind technical interviewing. So the goal was to bridge that gap. Coding interviews, who cares what your resume says? You can code, you can code. And other engineers can look at the code and understand that very, very, very quickly. So that was the idea behind one of our first products. And what you touched on with the written examples is getting closer to having a structured interview process, because if everyone's asked the same questions, that's another way to eliminate bias, just on a whole, not specifically for people. So, interviewing. If you know the person discloses that they are on the spectrum beforehand, there's some pretty quick tips that you guys can do. So finding out their strengths and weaknesses in detail before they come in for the interview. You could even send them an email saying, hey, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Please list 4 of each. So that way the interviewers know that they're going to be fidgeting, they're going to be rocking. Sometimes I freeze up under pressure and it might take me 30 seconds to recover. These are all bits and pieces that can really help drive you towards success in hiring persons. So the interview structure outline, this is key. We just touched on it with the written questions, but if you also give them an outline, I think you guys already do this when you're sending out the interview agreement, the calendar invite. So they do send out like a list of who you're going to be speaking to and at what time. So that's great. When you get a little more depth there, that would also help. So you're going to be talking to lady first, then you're going to be talking to someone else. They're this engineering manager, and they're going to be asking you questions on physics. So one of the things that is quite helpful is providing some sample questions ahead of time. Even if you want to have the person come to the site an hour before and hand them the questions on a piece of paper, that would make a massive difference. So obviously, you're riding a line here, right? You don't want them to just go Googling for all the answers, but you want to actually get an accurate representation of the knowledge that the person has and their ability to execute on the job. So if you gave them an outline with some questions on it and had them sit in the interview room for 30 minutes to an hour before, that can be massively helpful. And they'll be ready to nail the interview when it does come. So another point that's key on these written questions, you should be asking questions, but the candidate should also have those questions written in front of them, because visually they might be miles ahead of where they are in audio. So if you can provide just those few accommodations, you'll start to see people on the spectrum perform much better. So here's some fun parts. The example questions. This is probably the most common question that I've seen on an interview that really throws a curveball to someone else. Tell me about a problem you solved. Who's asked that question in an interview? Yeah. So if you're on the spectrum, your mind starts racing. Which problem? Math problem, social problem, problem with my coworker, many things. So what we always advise is just ask the person to tell you about a situation at work where there was a challenging task and how you managed to solve it. Do you see how much more context is provided in the second question than in the first question? So basically, when you evaluate your interviewing questions, that's one of the things you want to look for, is providing contextual examples in the question. So here's another one. This was a big one that we worked with at EY, right? Lots of those firms, you have to work overtime in taxi. It's just how it goes. So instead of saying, are you willing to work overtime? You would say, in the fall, due to large demand, you may be required to work overtime. Are you willing to do that? So that way the person knows that you're not just trying to filter them. All right. Do you guys have any questions on that stuff? Because I'd love to dig in a little deeper with your specific interviewing process.
I have a question about disclosure.
Yep.
I mean, all of this seems to be really something that's manageable and we can take responsibility for if there's disclosure. And I have a really specific example of where the person came in, they didn't shake hands, they didn't make eye contact. You know, they were just, there were some, you know, based on, you know, just outside knowledge, the interview team was like, well, maybe they're on the spectrum. And then they give them a test for the job that they have to do, and the person does the best of the candidates. So they hire them. But then there was no disclosure, so we don't know.
Yeah.
And then after 6 months, the person got let go mostly because of some social stuff that just continued. There was some hygiene stuff, there was some, like didn't take direction. The perception was they don't take direction well, they don't listen, we told them multiple times. And who knows? I mean, maybe we don't know.
Yep. So disclosure is a major issue. And the way that we do it, everyone we work with, we disclose, we ask them if it's okay to disclose, and then we disclose. The way that I've coached companies to work around this is in the beginning of the interview process to make it a point to belligerently ask people if they need accommodations. And do that in a way that the person doesn't feel threatened. So you want to couch it in a way that they believe that the people they're interviewing with will not need to know about the accommodations unless they need to know. So the way I coach Pinterest on this last week was, listen, you guys are going to want to put whoever is HR business partner or the HR person that's in charge of recruiting, someone that you trust with confidentiality. So most of the time that wouldn't be the recruiter or the recruiting coordinator because one, they're just going to be dealing with so many people, they don't have time for that. And two, they probably don't have the authority to start calling in those accommodations. So it all starts from that interview process. If you can get the person to disclose then you're going to have a much better shot of understanding the person and retaining the talent. With your specific example, we actually see that a lot. There's a student in our current cohort that's running right now that worked at Google for 3.5 years. Google, 4.0 from Georgia Tech, a double major in discrete math and computer science. So he's a genius, but he can't close the loop. You're an engineer, someone tells you to do something, he just does it. When it's done, he doesn't say, I've completed the task. It's done, but no one knows it's done. So as you can imagine, that can kind of be a disaster. Someone else might start redoing the same thing they asked him to do. So that's when you mentioned that the person transitioned to psycho after 6 months. It happens even at like the top tech company. Right? They let this person go because of those same social cues, doesn't take direction well. So the last 6 weeks we've been working with him. He doesn't need any of the data analytics training. What we've done is just put in the most frustrating other members to create really frustrating group environments to basically help him bring out those skills to mitigate that. And then another thing is that when you do have a person working at the company, you can't ask, right? So it becomes really, really hard to give them those accommodations, and they are going to get like. So that's just something that HR departments have to be more aware of. And one of the tricks that they've done to basically increase this awareness is that Microsoft, they put up posters open to all people who support neurodiversity, because that's going to make it more likely for people to come out and explain that they're having this issue. I need the meeting notes in advance. I really like it if someone wrote up an outline after. So those are just some of the things that we've seen. It is sad though.
Can you give some examples of high support and low support? What would that entail?
Yeah, so basically low support, some of those people can pass as neurotypical. They'll just walk through the world. You might see a little bit of, they might be curt, they might be rude, they might seem like a know-it-all. That's one of the main presentations of the people that are in the cohort that we work with. As far as high support, so some people can't work a full day. That's one of the more noticeable things of high support individuals. Some individuals are completely nonverbal. Some of them have such strong, a lot of people on the spectrum have PTSD because some of the ways that therapy was done in the 90s could have led to that. So we'll see like angry outbursts. One of our students, if something doesn't go his way, he has to run like 10 liners before he can get centered and go back to work. So he is probably one of the more high support individuals that we work with. But after we told his manager, he doesn't mean anything by it, just let him go run his liners, and he's going to be an excellent contributing person. He's a photographer, so he does excellent job. Does that answer your question, Anna?
How many do you place in that are high versus low support?
We work specifically with folks that are low support right now. But my goal, like I showed in Microsoft thing, I'm really lobbying to basically, so our students are data analysts, data scientists, and software engineers. So as you can imagine, in the Bay Area, they're in demand. We've placed about 26 people in the last 6 months. And I hope to scale that next year as we gather more funding and make the program bigger and better. But each one of those people is kind of like the standard bearer for the autism initiative within that company. So we are getting these data scientists, these engineers, and these analysts in there, and as they excel, I'm starting to go back and go, listen, Facebook, you guys have 1,000 food service jobs right here at Facebook. Can we start getting people that are different skill levels into those jobs? So we work with those 2 or 3 people that need more support, because that's just not my expertise. I'm more of expertise in working with those analytical.
So there's 2 aspects to this. There's the job skill, and there's the sort of the, what we call the executive function capability, getting to work on time, you know, returning phone calls, going with bus route, that sort of stuff. How do you provide continuing executive functions?
So our program is actually really awesome. Can we toot our own horn for a little bit? What we do is we make sure that we have contact with their direct manager. first and foremost, and then we have contact with the student. So we coach them on a weekly basis, both parties, to ensure that the person's launching successfully. And we do that for 3 to 6 months, and it can be extended further. So another trick that we do is we do like a 4-hour to 8-hour training for the entire work group to make sure that everyone understands that maybe the best way to contact the person is we need to send a calendar invite to make sure that they're going to show up on that call. Because if you just say to the person, hey, I need you on this call at 3 o'clock, there's no way. They're going to be focused on something else. We need to have that calendar invite pop up. So one of the other ways that we coach on specifically the executive functioning category, we basically try to get to know every person and know what their challenges are. So my challenges are going to be different. My challenges are I will forget to do those. And some of the students, their biggest challenge is just showing up on time. Once they get in the office, they're also. So it's sort of about knowing where that is and knowing where you need to give those accommodations. I know that just really good. That's the answer.
Yeah, I just sort of addressing some of these things that things sort of fall apart after 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, so if we can get them through the first 3 months, we generally have seen that they'll stick. The only times that of all the people that we've placed, only one person has moved from the job, and that was because she left the job that we got her to take another job that she thought was better. Then got fired from that job because they didn't understand the context. But she's going to be going to work at UI in 30 years. Any more questions? Yeah.
Do you usually place these individuals in a group of similar cohorts, or do you dilute them among different groups? What are the pros and cons of them?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think that there's a massive pro to putting an autistic person on a team with a bunch of neurotypicals, right? So I have the guy who does marketing for me is autistic, and he advises the program. He used to work for President Obama in the staff, doing Obama's schedule, right? So to the T. And I have grown as a manager massively. I did not used to send out meeting notes beforehand. I did not used to send out meeting notes afterward. I didn't give clear instructions written via email. And then after being yelled at by him about 7 to 10 times, I just started complying with these things that probably a good manager would have been doing in the first place. So that is the advantage of putting an autistic person on a team of neurotypicals. That along with the fact that you can't ignore diversity when it's neurodiverse. In my career, I've never really thought about diversity, whether it's your heritage or whether it's what kind of area you come from. So these are all things that you should be focusing on, but most people don't remember to focus on them. But if you have a neurodiverse person on your team, it will really bring that to the top. So when it comes to putting the people in groups with other autistic people, so that's the approach that EY has taken, and it's been highly effective because it allows them to form bonds, and every person on the autism spectrum is different than another one. So as a team, they generally can like fill in each other's skill gaps really well. So I'd say there's pros and cons to both. The con of having all the people in the group be on the spectrum is it's hard to show them where the opportunities are for advancement because you have them in a group already. We're going to promote them all at one time. And it just sort of makes their career path a little bit more uncertain. All right, I love these questions. Anybody have some?
There are a lot of people that are not neurotypical, but not having diagnosed with autism. And then how does that work? Like, I mean, I don't interview a lot, but my wife does a lot of interviews. We're very focused on behavioral aspects. Don't make eye contact, and I can see that being very challenging. And all this cultural thing, just making people aware of what they need to without that, or can you get these benefits if you're not diagnosed with it? Can you exhibit like two or more aspects of autism?
So that's actually a great question. Many people over the age of 30, probably your chance of getting diagnosed as a kid if you're over the age of 30 is very low. People in that age range, they were either able to function or they weren't able to function, and they got either institutionalized or they just sort of struggled through and made it happen. So if you're interested in looking into that, you sort of have to talk to a psychologist because we're not experts. But colloquially, a lot of the students' parents come in and say, "I'm autistic too, and I just never got diagnosed. This is my son and daughter. We need help with getting them launching." So we see a lot of prevalence like that. But yeah, when it comes to getting support from your employer, you should be able to just ask them. They don't usually require a doctor's note. Our program, we don't require like an official autism spectrum diagnosis because, like I said, they just opened up the diagnosis a few years ago. So if you have any of the original diagnoses, we'll take it.
You mentioned just a second ago about career path or career track. I'm wondering, do you have any examples where through your program you have several organizations working together to offer a more extended career path or career track as opposed to one spot you just serve them?
Oh yeah. So with SAP is the biggest place that you'll see this, right? So Joe Sintas, one of the first people that we placed at SAP before I was even with the company, so I can't take credit. He's been at SAP as a quality assurance engineer for 3.5 years, and he talks to us all the time. He's like, "Yeah, I think I need to find something else. What's next? I'm taking this coding class on the side. I think I might want to start doing some front-end engineering." So then we talked to his manager, and we're like, "Oh, we didn't know that Joe was not feeling as engaged with his job anymore. Sure, we can start looking for him to do some projects directly, working with the engineering team." So we're just in the infancy of that, right? It's just started 3.5 years ago. So a lot of the people will slowly start to want more. And to be honest, we don't know how that's going to go yet. EY, Microsoft, Chase, all the companies I listed, they've sort of formed an informal consortium to drive this initiative forward. So there's an Autism at Work Summit. Next year it's going to be in Redmond, Washington. I hope I can get ladies to come and go with me so we can get a program like this started here. But basically what they're doing is they're sharing information back and forth as much as they can. So say, for example, Joe wanted to do something else, but SAP doesn't have headcount, which is a major problem in SAP. Right? It's a completely grown and enterprise class company. They only hire when someone leaves or when they get develop a new project. So there is that consortium, and they are passing information back and forth, and they're passing resumes back and forth. Oh, sorry, we don't have a place for you, but you know, EY. Does that answer? Yeah.
I wanted to go back to the disclosure. Want your team to, yeah, I think if people understand what's going on, right, it's all about attention. So accommodation comes with understanding attention. Yeah. And if you in the interview process or the hiring, that you don't know that, you can't sort of have this kind of training or discussion.
Yeah, so if you're grading someone out and this person's just rude in the interview process, from the get, you're obviously not understanding. I wholeheartedly agree with you.
So how do we, I mean, in general, are people with autism willing to share that? Or?
Well, the ones that I've worked with, I've basically told them, if you want to have successful employment, one of the keys is just being open about it. So the guy who worked at Google, we got him like multiple job offers in like a couple of days, because right, we worked at Google for 3.5 years. It's not that hard get the interviews and get the offer. So his personal preference was to not disclose until he got the offer. And that works for some. But for other people that were getting in at EY, we think that it's important to do the disclosure up front because SAP has opened up all of their roles, all the open roles to people that are on the spectrum. So maybe you're going in with a hiring manager who's never worked with the population, and then you really need to figure out early on whether it's going to work. As far as the work group, once people understand that you're going to interact differently, and they can really internalize that, I've noticed that they just sort of throw out the soft skill aspect and they just focus on the quality of the person's work. Right? They start looking at it and, well, Ryan learned a new coding language in 4 days. So what if he might have a conversation with me and walk away without saying goodbye or walk away without saying we're done? That's another common thing. Like the exchange of information has occurred, I'm out of here.
Just a follow-up, I guess, do you know, has it helped to provide kind of a cue when you interview people or you first interact with them for them to understand in this workplace, these are our policies, desires, diversity, aspirations.
Yes.
And, you know, so they have the idea like, oh, well, maybe it's okay if I can really be a little more a tool? Or
Yeah.
Useful strategy?
Yes, I'm not sure if I mentioned it on this side, but if you define that your workplace culture is open from the get in the interview, this is something that recruiters should be doing on the first one screen. Diversity is extremely important to us. We value all people. We think that through difference of opinion and difference of background, it's actually going to raise the quality with which this entire organization functions. If you lay those things out, the chances of a person disclosing that they need some accommodations is going to be much higher. So you should be given a presentation. You seem like you have a well-versed background. Anyone else? This is awesome. I love you. Oh, here's just one of the pictures of our class. I realized after I made this presentation, it doesn't have pictures. One of the interesting things here is that's actually Khalid, the president and CEO of Chargeback. So he came in to meet with the class, and then you can see Carrie sitting in the front row. So he basically said, this is an amazing initiative. How do we hire some people? And he executed on it. So that's one of the cool things about working with a 50 to 150 person company, is you can get things done fast. Visa, we're working with them. It took us 9 months to get Ryan hired, but he's doing great there. EY, they've just been scaling up their program. They're going to hire 10 people in San Jose in the fall, or in the spring, sorry. So that'll be a pretty awesome one.
So who's your regional center?
Yeah, so I tried to, we are vendorized by like SART and Golden Gate Regional Center. I don't know how much that helps us, but I like to work with, they have a new lady in charge of business development. She's really awesome. Her goal is to basically start expanding these job programs. So we're working with SARC a lot, not so much the other one.
Do you happen to know of any large companies that may be starting or investigating how they can bring programs like that or educate HR and people who go through the interview and applicant screening?
Yeah, we just gave this presentation to the CEO of Voya. I don't know if you guys know Voya. It's like a pretty massive investment portfolio management company on the East Coast. It used to be AIG, I think. So their CEO reached out to us and said, how do we do this? How do we implement it?
Yeah,
So
I'm thinking about, PG&E and Coca-Cola and Pepsi and large
I reached out
companies.
to Coca-Cola. They're in Atlanta. We have a bunch of friends and partners in Atlanta, and I really want to open up the Atlanta market. One interesting thing that I want to touch on is the people on the spectrum, there's a common misconception that they won't move or that they can't live on their own. That's completely incorrect. We have students who have come to our program from Montana, Georgia, Texas, New York, New Jersey, and then we've had students that are currently working in Washington, D.C., Dallas, Austin, Portland, wherever Microsoft is, Redmond. So basically the thing is that if there's a job and the person wants the job, they're going to move and they're going to be successful because the companies understand. So yeah, we work with about 35 different partners.
It's exciting.
Only about 10 of those partners hire right now. So I think that's slide here about ways you can get involved. So basically, I'll just talk. The ways that you guys can get involved are you can come in and volunteer with the students. You can invite the students here to meet them and see a presentation on what kind of work you guys are doing here. So we make it super easy to interact with the program. And then obviously the end goal is we want people to make hires, but that's not the first step. You need to understand that your company's in the right place internally with the HR practices and essentially find an amenable hiring manager. That's the place I learned with most of these companies. We went to eBay, we went to Pinterest, we went to Facebook. Google is launching their own initiative that we consulted on because Google's very secret. And they're going to be hiring, they're only hiring students for internships. So we're pushing, so it's getting people to hire some people full time.
What about universities? Are they starting to be more open or active in,
Yes.
being more aware of students who have those?
So state institutions are where most of these students get pushed to, and most of them are completely underwater within the Disability Resource Department. For example, I know San Jose State has 300 at least people on the spectrum, but their disability office is too busy to even start working with someone like this. They've been cut like 4 times in the last 3 years. I think they're down to like 2 staff trying to service over 1,000 people. But then there's other examples like RIT in New York. They have a specific autism initiative to support people on the spectrum.
So it's starting. This is kind of like all new.
Yeah, now's the time.
As far as the development and support.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, exciting.
Well, it's going to be pretty